You know, some of my favorite hunts have been on public land, and all in all, there's a lot of big bucks I've shot on private land. I love hunting private land every year. I love the entire game of private land. Private land's different though, because you have to rely on a lot of hard work. You have to rely on very successful planning for access, entrance and exits for stand strategies. And for what I see largely is you take a good group of public land hunters, they're gonna have a hard time on private land. It's not like shooting fish in a barrel like they think. And likewise, if you take some good private land hunters that are relying on certain features, water holes, food plots, whatever it might be, to stick them on public land, it makes it tough. The reason I say that, because on public land, you can make mistakes and go find more food. You can be mobile. You can find the food source of the moment. You can react to hunting pressure, and you can move a mile away, sometimes 2 miles away. In the case of where I hunt in Ohio, there's several chunks of public land, and two in particular are over 60,000 acres, and then another one's 100,000 acres. So huge tracts of land where you can pre-scout, you can find certain features you're looking for, which we'll talk about, on big open hardwoods and rolling hills, and you can go in and have a reasonable chance at great success. Now, we found that to be true. I found that to be true in Pennsylvania since 1993 in big hills. You know, in Pennsylvania where I hunt at 600 to 800 foot changes in elevation, where in Ohio it's more like 200 to 300, and it's kind of in between around here. Minnesota is more like Ohio, and then in Wisconsin where I hunt it's closer to 400 to 500 feet change in elevation. So those hills dictate where deer are going to move and where they're not going to move. So they create a lot of opportunity. And this buck in particular was a really cool hunt because I really only wanted to hunt a couple mornings. It was right before Thanksgiving, and we had a giant major cold front that went through the Saturday and Sunday before during our season here in Wisconsin for opening day of gun. Just giant. I remember I was putting up a pop-up the night before, and it blew off down in a ravine, had to go get it, and I was trying to be really stealthy, and that didn't work out too well. Just picked that thing up like an umbrella and tossed it 70, 80 yards down the ravine. So really big winds. I want to say 40, 50 mile an hour winds. The temperature dropped at least 35 to 40 degrees, and just a major cold front. And when that happens, those deer get socked in. They don't move around much. There's a lot of stress. They're losing energy because of stress, because of missed feeding opportunities, and because the temperature's changing. When that breaks, then they're very hungry and they move. You throw that into the end of the rut, which this was in Ohio, and it's like putting gas on fire. It's just smoldering fire, waiting for something to happen. You throw some gas on it and boom. You get a great reaction by those deer to start moving, even if it's just a flurry of a day or two right after that front goes through. And that was that opportunity that was created here. I'm really excited to introduce to you our new food plot seed company, and seed company in general, but WHS Wildlife Blends. These are our first two mixes, the Big Boost Brassica and the Fall Green Blend. And those are my personal mixes. You know, I've been experimenting with mixes and food plot mixes since 1998, so this is the 25th season. And a lot of those have a lot of roots back into buckwheat, peas, tillage radish, and all kinds of brassica blend, even mixing with brassica with clover back in the day in 98, 99. And so these are the culmination of all those mixes and all those experimenting throughout all the days, and also all the strategies that we bring to you about food plots here. So the supply is limited. We're just doing this as a first time run this year, and they're going really well. The sales are really going fast. So I appreciate you guys checking it out. It's on our website, in our store. And really appreciate you taking a chance on us and really planting and buying these and planting these mixes that are my own personal favorites that you can put in the ground on your hunting land this fall. Now, opportunity was created by using topography between bedding areas. And what's cool about public land is a lot of times the bedding area is also the feeding area, meaning that you go into these large clear-cut areas where there's a change in topography, there's a change in habitat, there's regeneration after a clear cut, and you're hunting in between these pockets. In this case, it was almost like a giant irregular shaped barbell. Now that barbell was also connected by a trail, logging trail, hiking trail, where you could come in and hunt from. And, you know, and over that entire walk, I would say the distance between those two clear cuts might be a 50-minute walk, 45-minute walk, a pretty far walk in between the clear cuts, so a pretty good distance between the two. Now the deer obviously typically aren't going to move around that trail system to connect those two locations. Instead, you're looking for topographical features that feature flats, especially on a hillside, between those two areas. Now there's other hillsides or flats around those clear cuts, and those are also good locations. There's clear cut, clear cut, clear cut. There's flats in between, and they all can actually be good spots to hunt. And so that's where you're looking for long range cruising. And then might cruise, you might have an 800 acre area or more, a couple thousand acres, and these bucks will travel around that giant loop on public land because they're not going to a certain food source. They're not going to a certain bedding area. They're not even going to a certain group of does and fawns or one big group. They're looking at random pockets all the way around, and you're looking for those even amounts of topography that allow them to cruise from one hot spot of food and cover being in those cuts to the other, and allows you to get in between some great deer movement without having to go right into the bedding area. Who cares where they bed? If you go in there and you are right on top of their bedding area, by and large, in an area of tens of thousands of acres, you're going to spook that deer. They're really hard to narrow down. Now, if you're talking a small island to cover out in a swamp, very easy to pinpoint where a buck might be. And you can set up for them to come out or into those locations, but not the case when you're hunting tens of thousands of acres of cover in giant clear cuts that might be 80 to 200 acres or more on the big side of a hillside. So first of all, we're looking for that topography between bedding, those flats, those benches, those areas where a deer could cruise. Not those steep faces, not going up steep faces, down, not going across them, but instead on those flats. What's cool about that is you'll often find good bedding in those locations, side bedding to those big clear cuts, and you'll find old rubs and especially old scrape, because there's not a lot of flat area. When you have a convergence of ridge systems and a flat, they come together and you find that perfect spot where there's a scrape. We had set up shop in this location. We had come out here in September, one weekend of scouting, might have been early September, mid-September. And what we did is we went out there and we found 5 or 6 areas spread out over 2-3 miles. We looked for these similar features of benches between clear cuts, topographical change. We're not hunting the bottom valley. We're not hunting the tops that are wide open. We're not hunting near the trail systems. We're walking in a half hour plus, and we're finding these little spots where we could throw a trail camera on an old scrape and see what happened. What we found is out of about 5 spots, it was funny because a couple of them were really looked good. We had old sign. We went out there and they're just duds. We're not seeing any new action, any new bucks in those locations, any rubs, any scrapes when we came back in October. And there just really wasn't much there. So we really narrowed it down to about 3 locations out of 5 and kind of went with it for the season. So really, other than going in and hunting some of these stands and sitting on them, checking out the trail cameras, we really didn't do a lot of scouting after that one weekend of scouting. And that really took place on a Saturday. And that was it from morning until evening, just looking at these 5 locations quick, going right to them based on those flats, based on those benches between clear cuts, not too far over the ridge, not at the bottom, not at the top, just looking for a flat and connections. Where I was hunting in this spot happened to be probably a third of the way down, I would guess, maybe not quite half in those locations. So one weekend of scouting. This doesn't take much, folks, because you're looking at this from home. You're looking at the topographical features, and I want you to really check out something I really should mention is we have our Hunting Hills and Thermals web class that will be coming out in early September. Can't wait for you to see it, and it really breaks down all these topographical features, how thermals play in the morning and the evening, how that affects your hunt, how wind follows ditches, my few favorite, like this, drop dead, highly proven, decades proven features to look for when you're going out on public or private land, and really narrowing down how you should hunt hills and thermals. So this is part of that. In this case, in this hunt, that cold front was key. I wouldn't have driven down there. It's actually about 800 miles to go down there. In fact, I left on a Sunday after Dante shot a buck. We took care of that buck. I left, let's say 4 or 5 in the afternoon, drove all night, got into my spot 3:30 in the morning, actually lose an hour going out to Ohio. Long travel. I slept for about 20 minutes in the truck, got up, and went out to my stand location. And this is on the backside. There's still a little bit of wind, but boy, the wind speed had probably dropped from 40 miles an hour down to 15, 20, which is still brisk. The temperature was in the high 20s. It was probably closer to 60, 65 just a couple days earlier. So major temperature drop, and it was sunny out, and I was just waiting. About a half hour from the truck. You know, that's about how far I was in. Enough to get away from people, but not enough to stay away from people. I noticed we saw a lot of people there the next year. What it proves over and over again is that quality of time is worth far more than lots of time. You know, I ignored all the other times. I went down there for one morning of hunting, a second morning of hunting, one evening, and shot them in the first 2-3 hours of the sit. Because of that major cold front change, because of putting all these pieces together, same pieces that I put together in Pennsylvania for 20 different bucks, you know, 20 different seasons, 16 bucks in 20 different seasons, close to 30 bucks on public land altogether. And this is one of those ways I do that consistently in any state I go to that has hills. It's really easy to narrow down. We talk about this in another video where we talk about hunting the UP swamps and hunting out on swampland and how you can take advantage of that in Michigan public land, in any public land like those features. But there's a difference between hunting these areas, and this is really exciting. You know, I sat there for 2-3 hours. I was getting pretty chilled, and the wind was brisk. It was a little bit of a walk in, so you get sweated up. I have to go in, drop down over a big open point where there's not a lot of deer sign, except during the summertime. I had to drop down below that, down a steep face, down a narrow trail with a lot of briars and greenbrier, and then get into my stand location. It was about that time where I'm getting chilled and kind of thinking, you know, you start doubting yourself, man, did I just drive 11 hours, sleep for 20 minutes, and come out in this stand location? And you wonder if it's worth it. I want to get back for Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden it happens. I have a fawn running right down next to me looking back, doe coming, buck on her heels. I hear grunting. I was able to pull back, make the shot, and was able to recover that buck. And it was a tough haul. It was tough getting the buck out, carrying him out. It was a long tracking job. He actually only went about 100 yards. We had some misleading blood. I don't even know where that came from. But bottom line is that hunting those features, that topography, and in those movements between bedding areas, big open woods. What's really cool about hunting public land in general is that quality features really stick out because it can be really a monoculture of habitat, open hardwoods, hills, rolling hills. So when you have clear cuts and you have good topographical change and it all matches together, then it can create the perfect scenario for a great hunt. And really looking for those features of that open top, that hidden bench system between those clear cuts, which feature bedding areas and food, sets shop up great for those long range cruisers. And that's where, when you're hunting with a bow on public land and you really want to have a quality hunt, I like that towards the end of the season. You know, the woods that already been pounded by a lot of people, the bucks kind of go into a really reclusive role, go find areas where there's no people. That's what keeps them alive. But when you get into, especially in southern Ohio, you get into the 15th, 18th, 20th, in this case might have been the 22nd of November, you're getting into those waning days of the rut, but that's where those long range cruisers come out, and that's where you're hunting those features. This isn't something you go into in September and expect a buck to show up there, because unless it relates to some type of food that's close, some type of bedding that's close to that food, he's not walking a mile or a half mile or probably even a quarter mile every day to food. In fact, he's living in a small window in that early season, but his range really heats up by the time it gets in late October, early November, and for the month of November. And that's how you can take advantage of some great movement. And this also works when you get into the gun seasons. It doesn't matter if it's Pennsylvania, Ohio, you're looking for long range movement, maybe in a location where you have hunters a mile and a half in the distance, and you're working on these big features that help to funnel deer movement. And you can use these features right here to find success anywhere a whitetail roams within these type of habitat features. And I hope you can do that. And if you don't have clear cuts, you're looking for diversity. You're looking for lowland where it meets highland, age of timber, where young meets old, where you have upland. The more stories that stand can tell and the more habitat features that come into one, the greater the opportunity for you to say, this is a great spot to hunt. Verify it with just a little bit of sign, trail, and then make sure you're heading there when the weather's right, and you'll find success more often than not and be a consistent buck hunter and buck killer on public land for decades to come. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.